Farm for Profit Podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm for Profit Podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm for Profit Podcast.
Hey guys, we're back in Iowa, and it's a little bit colder here today than it was when we were in Clewiston, Florida.
Yeah. Yesterday was really cold.
Yeah, the wind.
Yeah.
But I tell you, one thing that we don't have that they do have. Can you guess?
Sweetness.
Nope, you're wrong.
One thing that we don't have that they have?
Correct. Mosquitoes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. The one thing I brought back that I was not anticipating bringing back was bug bites. So other than that, it was beautiful. What a great time being down there. Just we're lucky here in Iowa. We already froze our mosquitoes away.
That's true. That's true. Well, those mosquitoes down there were like birds.
Yeah, well, kind of like that, exactly. But we are going to talk sugar today. I don't know if either one of us, any of us knew before going down to Florida how sugarcane was actually grown. Did you know, Dave?
I had no idea.
Honestly, I've toured some sugarcane. I guess it would have been plantations down in Panama when I studied abroad down there in like 2009. But still never got the agronomic in-depth of
You
how.
studied abroad?
For 2 weeks, yeah. It was a over Christmas break study abroad trip.
Oh, okay. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
Yep. So, so I knew how to drink rum from it because
Oh.
it seemed like every sugarcane deal down there had a rum plant or a distillation process
See,
attached to it.
I knew sugar beets because I went to school in Fargo, North Dakota.
Okay.
That's sugar beet capital. Every college kid drove a sugar beet truck.
Every college kid.
Well, most of them.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Every college kid. You guys,
Tanner and I, the reason we got these two great guests on here with us, and Tanner and I had lunch with them on the Sugar Express train.
That's right.
We were invited down there by U.S. Sugar, and they have one of the best avenues, the best vehicles to give you a tour of their whole process, and it's a train, an old train that they've redone.
You should be proud of me. I just refrained from saying choo-choo.
Well, you just did.
But
so.
I just did it.
Yeah. So we have Jared and Daniel with us, and we're just let's go to Jared and get a background. Who are you? Where are you from? How'd you grow up, and how'd you get into sugar, and what do you do for sugar?
Yeah, so my name is Jared Player. So Clewiston, Florida, we're located the big lake right there in the middle of the state, Lake Okeechobee. We're right there south of Lake Okeechobee. I grew up about 30 minutes to the west of Clewiston, Florida. Family did a lot of citrus and cattle. Really never thought I'd get into sugarcane. One summer, my boss at one of the ranches I was working at came to me and said, "Hey, you want to do something besides build fence and work cows all summer?" And I said, "Sure." So I got on at U.S. Sugar as an intern doing soil samples and leaf tissue samples. They asked me back the next year and the year after that as an intern, and I started with them full-time in 2016 after graduating from college. So I've been with the company since 2013 in various roles. When I started full-time in 2016, I started as a production supervisor, moved up into a farm manager role, helped manage about 40,000 acres for the company. And then a few years ago, I kind of got pulled off the farm, and I'm now in the ag operations office where I pretty much focus on process improvement, special projects, things like that. Pretty large precision ag and ag technology focus right now, just all throughout the company and the whole process of growing and processing sugarcane.
Great.
Did you hear that? He manages 40,000 acres.
That's a lot.
That's pretty good.
I heard he went from building fence to now he's the man. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
That is actually Daniel's dad that I worked for on the farm.
Okay.
So we're a big company, small town. One thing I guess we'll probably get into a little later is, most of our employees have been with the company for an average of 30 to 35 years. You don't really hear that anymore. But just like Daniel can attest to, we're really just one big family down here.
Well, that was Jared, but we've got two guests on here, so we need to get Daniel introduced. Daniel, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what your tie to U.S. Sugar was?
My name's Daniel Rifa. I am the farm manager over the sweet corn operations at U.S. Sugar. I've been with the company this will be my 11th year. Started out in HR, actually, retirement and insurance with the company. Was there for a little under a year before I got the opportunity to go out to the farm and learn under some really well-known corn growers in the area. And it's kind of been history since, as far as my career here at Sugar. It's been all corn since.
I thought
Grew up in Clewiston, the hometown here where your Sugar is. And my father's going on 35 years with the company. My mother, 35 years as well. My cousin, I think, is approaching 25 years. My uncle retired at 47 years with the company. So I think I've got 35 left.
So did they all get nervous when you were in HR? Like, oh, there's HR. Like, oh, can't say that.
I was kind of on the paper side of HR,
All right.
so it was a little more tedious and monotonous. Needless to say, I was happy to get out on the farm and didn't have any intention of farming. Just kind of fell in my lap and haven't looked back since.
I like this because I think our listeners are going to be curious as to why we have a sweet corn guy on a Sugar episode.
And I got to say, I do not associate Florida with corn
No.
normally. So that's interesting. Well, we will actually come back to
Winter-
that because it's part of the talk.
Yeah,
So-
winter vegetable market of the world.
Yep.
So, guys, we came back from Clewiston, Florida, and everybody's like, what were you doing there? And I said, agriculture, the podcast, and they said, oh, oranges, immediately.
Oranges?
That's what everybody thought. And so I don't know if it's because it's on the license plate, but nobody constituted or related sugar to Florida from where I'm at anyway.
So
Yeah, most people associate Florida with beachfront, Disney World, and oranges.
Yep.
But one thing that people don't think about Florida is, they call the area that we farm, the Everglades agricultural area, south of Lake Okeechobee, the Winter Salad Bowl. So, like Daniel was just talking about with sweet corn, I think U.S. Sugar, we're probably the largest sweet corn grower east of the Mississippi. So one of the recent acquisitions we made was Rouge River. So we grow sweet corn from South Florida all the way up into Canada. And then not only sweet corn, but we got guys down here that grow green beans, squash, broccoli. If there's a vegetable that can be grown, we grow it right here in South Florida. We're growing crops during the time of the year that nobody else can grow crops. So, you're November, December, January, February, that's like our prime time growing season for a lot of our vegetables.
Salad bowl of the winter.
I know. I kind of like that. I do. And we got to eat some of those fresh vegetables as U.S. Sugar put together a personalized, almost, very custom supper for us the last night that we were there.
Yep.
Not only did we get to eat on the train, we had a custom put together meal. But
Dave's favorite was the duck fat.
Oh, yeah,
It was good.
it was. So did you guys think before we went down there that, U.S. Sugar, I immediately thought, oh, association. U.S. Sugar Association, and then I realized that U.S. Sugar is a company that's a farming company.
Yep.
Yeah, planted right there in the sweetest city in the world. Or at least the sweetest city in the U.S., right? That's what Clewiston's known for, Daniel?
That's the name of it. Sweetest town.
Sweetest town in the U.S., the sugar capital. So let's do this. Let's start diving into what it takes to grow sugarcane. So I was surprised to learn that sugarcane, although it's planted in rows, doesn't look like it when you pull up next to a field.
No.
How's planting work, Jared?
Yeah, so we think of sugarcane as a hay crop or like the grass in your yard, right? So you plant it once, you cut it, and it grows back. You cut it, and it grows back. Unlike your yard or a hay crop, we only get one cutting off of that crop per year. So sugarcane vegetatively propagates. So what you do is you take a whole stalk of sugarcane. That's your seed source. So if you look at that stalk, it's almost like bamboo. There's little joints all up and down the stalk. At each one of those joints, there's a bud, or what we call an eye. So to plant sugarcane, you take that whole stalk. What we do is we take two stalks side by side, end to end, from one end of the row or one end of the field to the other end of the field. You make these furrows. So we furrow about 8 to 10 inches deep on 5-foot centers. You throw those stalks down in the bottom of the furrow, then we have a covering rig come back behind that laid down seed. You cover that seed up, and then that cane will vegetatively propagate from the eyes on that sugarcane stalk. Our company plants about 55 to 60,000 acres of cane a year. We do most of that with a hand plant crew. We have been trying to mechanize that process, but just because of how sensitive the eyes are on those stalks of cane, mechanization is kind of hard just because of how beat up that seed source becomes. There's quite a bit of inefficiency with the mechanization as well. So typically about 1 acre of standing seed cane will plant about 10 acres of a field with a hand plant crew. A mechanical crew, you're looking about one acre of standing seed cane only plants about 3 to 4 acres of a field. But basically that's what we do is we take a whole stalk of cane, we lay it in the bottom of a furrow, cover it up with dirt, and that's our seed source. We're not typical of like, a corn seed or a bean seed or anything like that. We're using actual stalks of cane to plant that crop.
Would the sugarcane plant ever produce a seed if you let it?
So what they'll do is they'll make a flower, right? So once that stalk of cane reaches maturity, it'll make like a little seed head, but none of those seeds on top of that stalk are viable. So in order to create a variety, you basically have to take those little seeds off of that flowering seed head, and you have to do that traditional breeding inside of a greenhouse or inside of a laboratory. It won't produce a seed like you would like your Bahia grasses or anything like that. Really, the only way it has to reproduce is those little eyes sprouting off the stalk.
So when you guys want to advance something that's, say it has better roots than the next variety, you have to do that through crosses, or are you actually doing that in the greenhouse?
No, so we're doing it through a cross. So we do all of our breeding in a laboratory or a greenhouse, but it's all a traditional breeding program. So you take this variety that has certain attributes that we like, another variety that has certain attributes that we like, and we do a traditional crossing and germination of the two seed sources. Once you do that crossing, you'll have thousands of genetically different offspring. Those genetically different offspring will get planted in a greenhouse. The ones that make it in a greenhouse, you'll have a small plot field trial with those. But with all that being said, because sugarcane takes 12 to 15 months to mature, once we do that traditional crossing, it can be 10 to 15 years after we've made that crossing before we develop a new commercial variety. So, for example, I think we talked about it when y'all were down here. One of the top varieties that we have is CPCL 05-1201. So that variety was bred in 2005. It was the 1,201st offspring out of that crossing, and it didn't become a commercial variety until probably 2015, 2016. So that's a good 10 or 11 year stretch from the time we did the traditional crossing, got those thousands of genetically different offspring, and from those thousands of genetically different offspring, one viable commercial variety came out of that crossing.
That's nuts.
So variety development's a huge aspect of what we do, and it's a long road from crossing to creating a seed source, right? So because you're using a stalk of cane as your seed, you got to have those stalks of cane to plant for your seed. So once I get 1 acre worth of seed, I can only plant 10 acres with that 1 acre of seed, right? So then the next year I have 10 acres and I might be able to plant 100 acres. But it takes years before you get a good crop of seed to be able to spread that variety.
And I don't know if you caught it. He stated that they hand plant about 60 to 65,000 acres per year. And if we know that you can get a harvest every year for 3 years, now we're up to 180 to 200 and some thousand acres. Mm-hmm. So 10 acres to 100 doesn't go a long ways when you're talking 200,000 acres.
Right.
That's a process. But I want to point out, Corey, your hybrid seed corn,
Yeah.
the label, is it CLC 1205? Can you tell that your hybrid number in corn just like he did, that makes sense.
So there's variety numbers in corn
Yeah.
that would, like, as sometimes, Hogemeyer might sell the same thing as New Tech.
Yeah.
And they might not have the same hybrid name, but the variety is the same.
Okay.
So,
and
yes,
that
there's
would tell
certain
you-
ones I would know.
Okay.
Yes, but I guess if you have to know it for 16 years, like I think you
you'd
would
know
probably remember. I just can't imagine, like, it seems such like a slow process to get your next one, whereas in corn, we might throw 200,000, we call it the big funnel, right? We throw 200,000 crosses that a computer makes up that could potentially be good parents on both sides for traits that we're trying to select for. Out of that 200,000, we might get 4 or 5 or 1 of the crosses that we like, and it takes about 5 years to get to that point, to get that to the market.
I think you guys are missing the whole boat here. And let's back up like 10 minutes ago. They hand planted the whole thing. And that's what blows my mind. The biggest takeaway I had, I've been thinking for the past couple days, how can we make this more efficient? I'm all about efficiency, and it just blew my mind. We're sitting on the train. They said they hand plant those end to end. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. We got to be able to mechanize that. And then they harvest it one row at a time.
You're getting way too
Where
far
at?
ahead.
Oh, my goodness. Like,
But I do think it's kind of neat because we got to stand next to some of the sugarcane.
yeah,
How tall would you say that was?
15 foot.
10 to 15 foot, yeah.
So you take 2 of those stalks, you lay those down, and then you cut each of those eyes apart to create your new plants. But I'm not kidding you. When we rode by on the train, it didn't look like it was planted in rows.
I mean, think about this. Think about how we planted corn, Corey. What was it, 60 years ago, horse and a plow? Mm-hmm. And
Probably
now
more than that.
it is just straight on, fully mechanized. I'm just like, I can't believe that you guys have not done that yet. There's got to be some engineer somewhere that's going to make billions of dollars on a harvest machine.
But is it that way because the plant can only take so much a day or so much at a time?
Right. So, the biggest reason we haven't fully mechanized yet is because of those inefficiencies we talked about in the mechanical plant crew. So the seed harvester that we use to harvest cane, we're going to use as seed. It's a whole stalk cane harvester. So instead of having a chopper box in it and a chopper blade cutting it into 1 to 1.5 foot sections, it only has a base cutter blade on it. So you have these 2 crop dividers that stand the crop up, and a base cutter, which is like a sawzall blade that cuts it about 2 to 3 inches above the ground. That entire stalk funnels through the system and on the machine and lays the whole stalk over. On a traditional harvester, like what we have to cut the stalks up into billets for the mechanical planter, we're cutting that seed source into 1.5 foot sections. You're introducing a lot more surface area. So when you introduce all that surface area or increase that surface area on your seed source, now you've opened up a lot of area for bacteria and fungus and things like that to enter that stalk of cane and kill the eye or the place or the bud where that new crop's going to vegetatively propagate from. So that's some of the main inefficiencies and the seed source. So we were using about 3 times as much seed in mechanical plant because you don't have as many viable eyes once you plant because of the bacteria and the fungus. So instead of having 2 stalks end to end up and down a field in a mechanical plant, when you look at the bottom of those furrows, it's just a furrow filled to the brim with these little billets. And you have to overcompensate with the amount of billets to get enough viable eyes once you cover it up with dirt. And then with also that being said, for every acre that we use for seed, that's an acre of cane that doesn't go to the mill to make sugar. So we use somewhere between like 7,500 to 8,000 acres of seed a year. Multiply that by, basically triple if you were going to do all mechanical plant. So now you have, 24,000 acres that you're not sending to the mill. That's a huge yield decrease by using that much seed. But with that being said, I would say us as a company, we're probably on the forefront and we're pioneering the way into mechanization. It's just a lot harder because we don't have a little tiny seed that we're putting through a seed drill or something.
Yep.
Right. So we have a whole long 10, 12 foot stalk that we have to be pretty gentle with, not to beat up the the eyes that are going to propagate.
Well, the other interesting thing that you guys have going for you that we learned is the soil type that you're planting into. So, Daniel, you're planting sweet corn not the same way that Corey is, mainly because of the soil types. Can you tell us a little bit about what you guys have for your soil composition?
We have anywhere from sugar sand, just pure beach sand, all the way to 95% organic muck, and everything kind of in between in our transitional soils. So with my sweet corn program, I utilize all 240,000 acres of U.S. Sugar's land. So when, like you said, they harvest every year, that crop retunes 3, maybe 4 years before they either successive plant it or make that field go fallow. And when they're making those fields fallow so they can rest for a year, that's the fields I'm using for my sweet corn. So sweet corn is just a byproduct of this rotational land management that Sugar uses. And so I'll have anywhere on any of these types of soil at any given moment of the year. So it does make it a little more difficult. You don't have the uniformity, and every field is just a different beast that you got to learn and roll with the punches.
Yeah. When we were sitting having lunch, we were riding by on the train, and it rained, I think, 4 inches like the day or two before we got there, and there was some tracks out in the field. And the soil down there, I'm telling you, it is as black as Iowa soil, maybe blacker. And I asked him what the organic matter was, and he said 95%. And I said, holy cow, because square. Cut that out, William.
No, we're leaving that baby in there.
Square, flat, and black here in Iowa is 3.5%, 5% organic matter, you know, right? Like, so it just amazed me. And then they didn't call it soil, they called it muck.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because there's nothing else there, and you just sink, right?
Now, there was cold muck and warm muck. Help me understand what the difference was.
So that's mainly just a sweet corn, how we differentiate where the land's at according to the lake. So we're right on the southern. We surround Lake Okeechobee, which is one of the largest freshwater lakes in the country.
The second largest.
And and about 2 miles off that dike, that levee system, is you kind of get this lake effect where, depending on the direction of the wind during a major cold front, you can get 1 to 3 degrees warmer, some places warmer than that. So you end up with this little pocket of warm land, and warm is, 1 to 3 degrees to us, because most of the time our freezes are right at 32 degrees, right at 31. There's some days where it's in the 20s, but those are very rare. So we hedge our bets on these 32-degree days that were 33 instead of 32. And so that's this little 2-mile stretch all the way around the lake on the southern and the eastern shore.
So where does that high organic matter come from? Is that because, like in Iowa or Minnesota or a lot of places in the Midwest, our soils were pushed down by the glaciers that came out of Canada. So we got some nice Canadian black dirt. Where did you get your black dirt?
Mostly it was former Everglades and sawgrass, and the lake used to flood drastically before they introduced all the levee systems and dikes and canals. So this was all swampland, all thick with sawgrass, and we have different soils. So there's some crabapple soils that kind of behave a little different than the sawgrass soils, and just depends what was planted there or what grew there naturally prior.
Okay. So it's just plant material, basically. And under that, I think you guys told me is limestone?
Yeah.
Okay. And the canals and the levees and all that for Lake Okeechobee was made to prevent flooding of the town, correct?
The Herbert Hoover Dike was created in response to some really bad hurricanes they had in the 30s, and so That did a lot of loss of life on the communities around the lake. But most of the canals and ditches that were dug were mainly for development.
Development for
all the major cities. Yeah.
for housing,
Yeah.
basically. So it wasn't done like that to make the 35-acre sugarcane fields.
Yeah, mainly the main reason was for development. Why they put the large canal systems in South Florida.
But that's caused your company to put together best practices, though, to make sure that the water stays clean or maybe even gets cleaner as you go through that. Could you guys, one of you, expand upon the diligence that you put into the process of maintaining water quality?
Yeah, so the BMPs, the best management practices, water quality, all of this really came about back in the early to mid 90s. So in 1994, the Everglades Forever Act was initiated and was started. And now that was a collaboration between the private sugarcane industry, the University of Florida, and various other stakeholders in the state. And that act developed these best management practices that include, soil sampling, leaf tissue sampling, canal cleaning, laser leveling. There's a whole plethora of different best management practices that you can implement on your farms and get points. But the main objective or goal of that Everglades Forever Act was to achieve a 25% nutrient reduction in the waterways. Since 1994, this previous year we achieved a 67% nutrient reduction. So we're actually cleaning the water 3 times better than what the initial standard or what the initial objective was of cleaning that water. So, BMPs, let me back up. So the BMPs are all regulated and we're audited by South Florida Water Management District. Some of your top BMPs, like I mentioned earlier, was leaf tissue samples, soil samples, laser leveling, canal cleaning. So within our farms, we have about 3,500 miles of field ditches and main canal structure internal to the farm. One of the BMPs requires us to remove the sediment out of all 3,500 miles of canals and waterways in our farm once a year. So we have a team of about a dozen excavators, and that's what they do pretty much 7 days a week, all season long, is they're going behind our harvest crews and cleaning those canals, pulling the sediment that would end up in the waterways out of the canals and back out onto our fields. That roughly 55 to 60,000 acres that we plant every year, about 40,000 of that 55 to 60,000 gets laser leveled before we plant it. So one of the ways we irrigate our crops, and that's why the canal systems are there, is we use seepage irrigation. So what we're doing is we're controlling the water table within our farm. So a part of those best management practices as well is maintaining a certain water level or an average water table level within our farm. So water management, Army Corps of Engineers, private industry, University of Florida, we came in and we set what those water tables should be per kind of discharge area. So whenever we turn a pump on or turn a pump off, all of that's dictated by water management and what those BMP levels are. So when we need to irrigate or we need to discharge, there's a certain water table that we have to. So let's just say the BMP stop is 5.5 feet and the BMP start is 6.5 feet. So we can't start that pump and discharge water off of our property until the water table reaches 6.5 feet. We can only discharge up until the water table reaches 5.5 feet. At 5.5 feet, we have to shut the pumps off. So now what we try to do, there's very little water that we actually discharge. Internal of the farm, we can move water around however we want to because it's not going out into the district. It's not going into any downstream environment outside of our farm. So if we need water over here in this section, don't need water over here in this other section, we have internal pumps that move that water to where we need it and remove the water where we don't need it. And we try to retain as much rainfall and retain as much water on our farm as we can without ever sending it off the farm, right? Water is a resource. It's an expensive resource and it's a resource that we have to have. Why would we ever really want to see that leave our farm? So even during tremendous rainfall events, we try to move that water internally as best as possible. But like I said, outside of the BMPs as well, another portion of this Everglades Forever Act, we're the only people in the continental United States that pays a special privilege tax. So the state had to come up with a way to pay for stormwater treatment areas, to pay to maintain the district canals. They needed the revenue to be able to clean the water that wasn't coming onto our farms, as well as the water all around us. And so we pay a special $25 to the acre property tax to be able to farm in the Everglades agricultural area. So there's two requirements there. One, we have to get, I believe it's 25 points a year in BMP points. And two, we pay the special privilege tax. And all of the money from that special privilege tax goes to cleaning up the water, improving our stormwater treatment areas, and making sure that we continue to reduce that nutrient load that's in our waterways.
So let's take a second, guys, and clear the air / educate all of our listeners. I didn't realize it, but when we got there was a focus on water, a hard focus on water. And what I didn't realize is you guys kind of get attacked on water, that you're like polluting it or making it worse. Because I really struggled. I was like, why are we talking about water so much? We came to talk about sugar. And because that Lake Okeechobee is so important to the community, I think these guys got to fight an uphill battle that people just think they're always polluting.
Yeah, we brought up the Des Moines Waterworks lawsuit that we faced here in Iowa, and it honestly feels like our Des Moines lawsuit was such a small in comparison to what these guys
We
are
didn't get
dealing
taxed
with.
$25 an acre, I'll tell you that.
That's over $5 million.
Oh,
I just
man.
did the math there. Yes, we want clean water, and obviously that just comes with the nature due to what you've got going on. But wow.
But for the listeners that didn't get to tour what we did, I'm telling you, I asked the question in the tour. Well, if you only have to do it to 25%, why do you go above and beyond to do it all the way to 60% to make it that much better? This is their home, their community, and they want to make sure that everybody knows that they are not. They're going above and beyond to clean the water.
Yeah, and not to this may be unpopular opinion, but since 1994, we've put $500 million into water restoration and environmental sustainability, right? So with the special property tax and other money that has just been donated or offered to help, we were the first company to even prototype a stormwater treatment area. We took out land that was in production just to test how well these STAs were going to work for the state. One of the biggest things that is a pet peeve of mine is, the activist groups, they take in all these donations, they do all these fundraisers, they have all these supporters, but how much of that money is going to cleaning up the waterways? How much of that money is going to actually doing something that has an environmental impact versus how much of that money being spent just spewing propaganda, right? I mean, we have several activist groups down here that are as anti-sugar as you can get. But I would almost guarantee if you got a hold of their financials, not a dollar of the money that they're raising is actually going into Everglades restoration. It's going into giving away free flats boats and sending their lobbyists on a private jet up to Washington, D.C. Right? It's not actually going into nutrient reduction and environmental sustainability like our dollars are.
And that's tough. I mean, we didn't plan on putting this episode together. Like, we truly sat on that train and went, this entire conversation needs to get on the mics. Because I loved it. I couldn't believe it. Daniel, you plant sweet corn almost 3/4 of the year. Because you start when? You start in July or September, and you keep going all the way to March?
Yeah, we start planting in September, right around the first week of September. We don't stop planting until March 15th, March 20th. And we start corn harvest first week of November all the way till the end of May.
Nice.
So we have sweet corn that entire time frame.
That process with the water, it kind of reminds me of the hunting industry, like the anti-hunters,
Yep.
like that. Like how could you do that? But they're the ones that love it so much, and they are probably the ones that spend most of the money on the conservation and creating habitat and all that, so it can be enjoyed for generations to come.
Yep.
Same thing with farming. Same thing with sugar. Like they're the ones that they want to keep doing it.
Stewardship.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of, like, speaking to the water, they think that we're the reason the Everglades were drained for sugarcane farmers and for farmers in the EAA. And in fact, they drained the Everglades, did all these canal systems in about the 1880s before sugarcane was even introduced. Sugarcane farming didn't start till the 1920s in South Florida. So all that drainage was built prior to us even being here.
You just took advantage because it was
Right.
a fertile.
Fertile,
Yeah.
rich soil.
Where did
And
sugarcane come
Florida's-
from?
What was that?
No,
Where did sugarcane come from?
So sugar started in, there was a prior company. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. Maybe Jared remembers what it was.
Southern Sugar Company.
And they started in the 1914s, 1920s.
Yep.
And they only lasted about 10 years before U.S. Sugar was formed in the remnants of that company. The founder, Stuart Mott, he's the one that started U.S. Sugar.
But then, did they bring the sugarcane over from Brazil, or how did sugarcane get into Florida?
Jared might know that one.
This is just hypothetical, but Cuba used to be a large sugarcane company, or country, sugarcane producing country. So if I had to guess, it probably has some kind of Cuban descent.
Because there's only two ways to make sugar, right? Sugar cane and sugar beets, or is there others?
Correct. So sugar beets and sugar cane, the end product is sucrose, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have, like your high fructose corn syrups, and you have your stevia and all your other artificial sweeteners. But sugar beets and sugar cane are the two agronomic crops that produce sucrose, which is cane sugar and sugar beet sugar.
Is it the same product? Like you could put side by side and you couldn't tell by looks or by chemicals or anything like that?
This might be the biased answer, but yeah, I think you can. Most people will probably say you can't, but sugar beet sugar tastes like dirt to me. So.
It's because it's in the dirt.
But aren't you guys in a co-op together? Don't you? I heard someone say that.
Our sugar's marketed together,
Okay.
right? So we're completely vertically integrated. We farm it, we haul it with our train, we mill it, we refine it. So we see that product from the time we're planting it to the time it's being packaged and sold to the end consumer. But we have a third party marketing association that handles all of our refined sugar contracts and things like that.
Yeah, that's
and for us, we're 65% of the refined sugar that we make is bulk refined sugar. So that means it's going out in 200,000 pound rail cars or 50,000 pound trucks. It's going into Coca-Cola, Gatorade, Nestle, Hershey, Betty Crocker cake mixes, things like that. So we're more of a ingredient sugar. We do package for, Publix, the Equate brand, SE grocers, things like that. Just whoever needs sugar, we put our sugar in their packaging. But you won't see a U.S. sugar package on the shelf.
That's right. The only thing they don't put sugar in is sugar-free Red Bull.
No.
Oh, wait.
Yeah, probably not.
Get it? Yeah.
High fructose corn syrup,
Boy.
though, maybe.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I worked really hard on that one.
Wow.
So, do you guys hear the train? We were on the train for you
Yes.
listeners, and there's a really cool locomotive, Sugar Express, etc. But that's not why they have the train rail. They have the train rail because how many acres? It's like 400,000 acres. How many acres is it that is the entire farm?
So our entire farm, we own about 200,000 acres.
That's what I
and then
thought.
about 45,000 acres is made up of small growers, family farms that sell their cane to our mill and our refinery. So altogether, we say we farm about 245,000 acres because our growers are a part of the family.
So, Corey, think about that. Like, okay, that much volume. I'm looking at how you guys are hauling grain to town. You've been in a semi for the past whatever, hauling grain to town. Could you imagine getting that many acres to town, to wherever the town is, if you will? Where we do a co-op, they have their own sugar mountain that they're dropping all this off at.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Usually
I don't think
next
it could,
to a rail.
I don't think it can be done without a rail. I think that
Yeah,
was
so
innovation at its best.
We have about 300 miles of track. We have 2 railroads. So we have South Central Florida Express, which is a short line railroad that is hauling cargo and freight. But then we have our internal U.S. Sugar Railroad. The internal U.S. Sugar Railroad is dedicated solely to bringing the cane from the field to the mill. And that's the only way our mill will accept sugarcane is via rail car. Each one of those rail cars holds about 40 tons of sugarcane. And we try to get that cane from the field to the mill in under 8 hours. So we harvest 24 hours, 7 days a week, and we mill 24 hours, 7 days a week. So that's really that just-in-time inventory allows us to get cane age and cane age is the time from it's harvested to the time it meets the front door of the mill under 8 hours. I think this season we're just over 7 hours.
The same rail area is also covered by Wi-Fi. They got one of the largest
That's
Wi-Fi
right.
networks to be able to communicate and keep everything all aligned.
We
But
couldn't get on it to post videos, though.
No,
that special
no,
VPN and all that kind of stuff.
But I tell you,
she's locked down tight.
We have gotten completely off the tracks, literally, of what we were supposed to do
It's
here.
like a joke I'm talking
Yeah.
about. I got a question, though, I want to ask more sweet corn questions to Daniel.
Well, all right, but we need to get back to sugarcane because we've only got to the planting process.
That's true. Okay, let's get into the growing process. We're going to start with the sweet corn because I can't believe how many times he has to spray his sweet corn. Mm-hmm. And he sprays it all by plane. Tell us about that.
So overall, we grow about 5,000 to 6,000 acres every season. Kind of varies, but 6,000 acres of sweet corn. In South Florida, disease and disease pressure is very high for vegetable crops. So we spray our preventative program about every 5 days, every 5 to 6 days. And then as the plant gets closer to tassel push, and we start spraying every other day. And the amount of acres we have and the fact that it's being done so often, there's not enough ground rigs in the area to spray it by ground. So we're spraying 100% by plane.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's common for all the sweet corn growers in the glades, is that it's predominantly all airplane. There's a few that have some ground rigs, but they're usually small growers with not a lot of acres.
Mm-hmm.
But any of the larger growers are all planes.
You're all hand harvested as well?
We are. We have done some mechanical, and we're working our way towards more mechanical as well. Labor has become a large issue, as it is everywhere in the country, and it's getting very hard to find labor crews to do this type of work. Right now, we're predominantly H2A labor, and that's getting more and more expensive every year, so we're really trying to find a way to transition over to mechanical.
Because like our sweet corn up here is mechanically harvested, but it's mainly canned corn. It goes into canned vegetables.
Green Giant up in Minnesota, I think.
Right. So you though, your sweet corn is the corn that we find in the grocery store, half a dozen ears at a time with the husk pulled back, right? What'd you call that? Is it packed corn?
Tray pack.
Tray
So
packs.
we do bulk fresh corn, which is what you'd find, 3 for $1 with the shuck still attached. And we also do some tray pack, which, 4 to 5 years in a cellophane wrapped tray. And we run 4 to 5 hand crews during our peak harvest in the spring. Each crew has about 50 workers on it. And so it's quite a big process, a lot of moving parts, a lot of people. And
Where's your corn sold then?
we sell all the way to the Rockies, all the way to Canada, and it can be in any number of grocery stores.
yeah.
One of our largest is, we grow a lot for Walmart, Publix, Winn-Dixie's, Wegmans, Kroger, Food City. I mean, you name it.
Do
Our
you-
corn probably goes there.
Do you guys set the price for that, or is that the suppliers or the
So
purchasers?
we are part of a sweet corn exchange, thanks to a law called the Copper-Volstead Act. It allows growers to come together and set a floor price for our product. We can't limit supply at all. We can't even talk about supply. It's just purely price. So we come together with all the sweet corn growers in the glades, and we say we can't go below this price. And we only set it for our spring market, our large volume market. During the fall and winter, which is fall market is right now, and we're approaching our winter market. Those are all open market usually.
Okay. I was just curious because, you used to be able to get a dozen ears of sweet corn around here, locally ground, for what? $3, $4
$4.
bucks. Now they're 5, 6, 7. I've seen 8.
Right.
Almost $1 a ear,
Right.
in some cases. So
Yeah, that's exactly right. But I want to know on the sugarcane side, in season on the sugarcane side, are you spraying just like that too, or what is that like?
No, so on the sugarcane side, our primary pest is weeds. So we're growing a grass in a subtropical environment. So other competing grasses are probably our largest pests. Guinea grass, Napier grass, Johnson grass, Bermuda grass, every type of grass you can think of. It grows really well down here in Florida. During the late spring, early summer, we'll get some rust. So brown rust, late spring, early summer, we'll get some orange rust. But typically, we try to breed for rust-resistant varieties. If you get a variety that gets brown rust and orange rust, there's not enough different modes of action in our fungicides that are labeled for sugarcane to be able to treat a brown rust and an orange rust susceptible variety. So weeds are number one. Our rust or our fungus is probably number two. And then number three is insects. During our plant season, that's really when a lot of our insecticides go out. Corn borer, it really loves small germinating sugarcane. When we get really dry, so here in the next couple months, when we really start to dry out, you'll see the corn borer spike. And all they're doing is they're coming down and laying their larvae in those little small sugarcane tillers, and they'll kill a tiller pretty quickly. But typically you come in there and you spray maybe one time for insect pressure, and then the cane gets tall enough, the stalk gets hard enough to where the corn borer don't become a problem anymore. So like I said, really the herbicide program on a typical field, you're spraying 1 to 2 times for herbicides. If it is a orange rust or brown rust susceptible variety, you may hit it once or twice with a fungicide. So our spray program on the cane side, it's not about the number of passes. It's just about the sheer number of acres that you got to try to cover.
very cool. So we talked about the planting process of the sugarcane. We talked about the planting time of sweet corn. What's the planting time frame, or do you guys spread that out because your harvest date's going to be so spread out?
Yeah, so sugarcane, typically we try to start planting the day after Labor Day, so September, and then the first week of September, and then just depending on weather, we try to wrap up and be done planting by December, January. So that September, October time frame is really an optimal sugarcane planting time. You're not getting pounded with rain every week. You still have some warm temperatures, and you still have some soil moisture. It's just really the optimal conditions for sugarcane planting. So we try to cram as much of the planted acres into that September, October, early November time frame. Basically, anything we plant typically after Thanksgiving, it starts getting cooler and drier. So we see germination rates kind of downtick, and then the speed at which that cane tillers and gets up to height and starts to mature is a lot slower.
Okay. So before we get
like I said,
get to harvest, I think you said it earlier, but I want to reiterate it. I mean, it's because it's kind of cool. You plant, and then how many years do you get crops off of it?
Yep, so typically 3 to 4 years, mostly 3. So you plant sugarcane. What I plant this year, I won't get to harvest that until next year. So we're in the 23-24 crop right now. What I'm planting is the 24-25, the 25-26, and the 26-27 crops. So I'll plant it this year, come back, harvest it the first time next year is plant cane. That cane will grow back, or what we call ratoon back. I'll harvest it the second year as first stubble. That's the first time it's grown back from stubble instead of plant cane. And then I'll come back the third year and harvest it as second stubble. And then depending on yields, depending on the soil quality and where that cane's located, we'll either allow it to go to a third crop, or we'll take that crop out. We'll rotate it with sweet corn or green beans, or depending on, like I said, the soil, we may come in and successive plant it. So a successive plant means we've gotten 3 to 4 years out of the first planting. We'll take that field out, we'll till it, and then in 2 to 3 weeks, turn around and replant it in sugarcane.
We just call that corn on corn. We just call that cane on cane.
Cane on cane.
Cane on cane. Yeah.
Did you guys see us just scrambling around the studio? You'll never believe what just showed up. We got a box from Everglades. So now we've got a whole bunch of Everglades hats and polos. Like, it literally just got delivered. Dave had to sign the package.
I had to sign the package. We got
Good
these
deal.
sweet Everglades polos that are very Florida style.
Because you guys are 100% John Deere equipment, correct?
Not
Yeah,
quite
so
100,
we're-
but pretty close.
Yep. On the
What?
farm side,
Yeah.
on the farm side, we're probably 95% John Deere. On the harvest side, all of our harvesters are John Deere CH570 sugarcane harvesters. We're using a tractor, name brand is Game tractors out of Louisiana for our cane hauling and harvest. But outside of that, we're like Daniel said, we're probably 95% John Deere.
So when they put that supper together for us, most of the community, it felt like, was there with us. You know, the mayor was hanging out, a couple council members. We got to sit at the table with these Everglades folks. We're going to have to get them on because they were very interesting themselves. But
We need to get the harvest.
I know. I think we're ready. I think we finally. I mean, he mentioned that Jared mentioned he started his job doing tissue samples, and we tissue sample. I didn't realize they did tissue samples on cane, on the leaf.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's after harvest that we cover it, but the sugar, we asked the question.
That's after harvest.
That's after
It
harvest.
is
Do you want to
after
go there?
harvest, yeah.
Yeah.
Percentage.
Yeah.
All right.
All right,
Fair
it's
enough.
after
We'll wait
harvest.
till after harvest.
We
then.
can
All
talk
right.
about it in harvest.
All right. We went through season. We planted. We sprayed. It's 1 year later. Actually, I do have one question for that. What's the best crop out of the three? Because I know, like in alfalfa, like it starts
Yep.
getting worse. Like, what's your best yield or sugar yield?
When you harvest it as plant cane. So on our muck soils, average plant cane yields somewhere between 70, 80 tons of the acre. Now, don't get me wrong, on some of our really, really good land on deep muck soils up close to the lake, we get 90 to 100 ton per acre crops. On our sand land, plant cane fields are somewhere between 50 to 60 tons per acre. And then every year after that, it grows back from stubble. You see a little bit of a drop off.
So it's the best
So
the first year. Your yield's best the first year.
Yep, your yield's best the first year. Mainly because you have a lot of equipment going through the field, right? During the growing season and even the sugarcane harvester, right? When that sugarcane harvester goes in there and harvests the cane, it's pulling up root balls, it's compacting the soil a little bit. So every year your yields drop off mainly because you're damaging the crop throughout the years, right?
Okay.
Things in the ground for 3 to 4 years. So there's a lot of environmental factors and things like that go into that yield reduction as well.
So, Daniel, is there like a rift between sweet corn and sugar, that sweet corn's better than sugar? Or, like, is there...
Well, I like to think it's better. But,
Okay, fair enough.
No, we're symbiotic. So, without sugarcane being here, there wouldn't be any vegetable land. So, we're putting that vegetable land in rotation with sugarcane when it's resting. So it's just it fits perfectly down here to work together.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so now let's get into the exciting part, the harvest. And although we didn't get to see it in true fashion due to the recent rains, tell us about the harvest process of sugarcane, Jared.
Yeah, so as a company, we have 7 harvest crews. They 5 of those 7 crews are 24 hours, 7 days a week. They work on 2 shifts, day shift, night shift. Um, we harvest about 205,000 acres a year of sugar cane, which is about 8.5 to 9 million tons of sugar cane. Um, so harvest crew is made up of basically 5 sugarcane harvesters and then anywhere from 10 to 15 cane hauling tractors. As we talked about before, sugarcane harvester cuts 1 row at a time. We try to keep those harvesters about 3 to 3.5 miles per hour. That sugarcane harvester is coming into the field on that 1 row, cutting the stalk at the base, feeding the stalk of cane up through the machine where there's some chopper blades. They'll chop that cane into 1 to 1.5 foot sections. There's a fan system that's separating the trash, which is leaf material, dead leaf material, basically everything that doesn't have sucrose in it, everything except for the stalk. Um, that fan's kind of trying to separate the stalk from that trash. We're putting the stalk on an elevator. That elevator carries the stalks of cane up and puts it into a tractor drawn wagon. That wagon, that tractor pulling the wagons will then haul those stalks of cane to an elevator that's located on a rail network, dump the stalks of sugar cane to the elevator, which is basically just a giant conveyor belt that lifts that cane up and puts it into one of our rail cars.
That's a
So
sucking
yeah,
fan, Corey, not a blowing fan.
Yeah, it's a sucking
It
fan.
sucks it up, not down.
yeah. So that's the one thing that makes sugarcane harvest a little bit different. So we burn our crop before we harvest it. So when we light that field on fire, what we're doing is getting rid of all that dead leaf material, all that biomass that is oh sorry yeah so all that biomass that doesn't contain sucrose. Um, and we are coming into the situation where we're doing a lot more green harvest. It's harder to get burn permits through the forestry division. So every morning, our harvest department calls in and gets burn permits. And then the state of Florida basically tells us if we can or can't burn that day, given the wind direction, transport wind speeds, the inversion rate of that day. There's a variety of different environmental factors that play into whether or not we can burn. But basically, the amount of biomass that's in 1 row of sugarcane makes it really hard for that harvester to determine what's a stalk and what's trash. So inside that harvester, there's a set of cameras. Those cameras are looking at the feed or the throughput of that machine and differentiating what's a stalk of cane and what's trash, and then adjusting the fan speed based off the amount of trash and then certain loss targets and trash targets that you've set. What happens when you have to cut green is you get so much biomass to that machine, the camera system can't really keep up with what's stalks and what's trash. So one or two things happen. You either send a bunch of stalks out the back of that harvester that's not going to end up at the mill, or you put a bunch of trash in that cane wagon that's going to end up at the mill. So what we see is when we do have to cut green is you're left with about a 6 to 8 inch trash blanket across that field of sugarcane leaves. Now, as we talked about before, you have a retooning crop that has to grow back after you harvest that field. So now your retooning crop has to try to grow through 6 to 8 inches of trash. So we see a yield loss the first year we harvest green because you're either, like I said, blowing half your crop out onto the ground, or you're sending a bunch of trash to the mill, and then you're leaving that trash blanket on the field. But your retooning crop even gets damaged because it's trying to grow up through that trash blanket. That trash is like a little microclimate, and it's perfect with the moisture and the humidity that we have down here for bacteria and insects and fungus to grow rampant in your field. Not only that, when we get a freeze event, what we see is because there's not enough sun contact with the soil with that trash blanket, when we do get a freeze, typically our green cut fields get damaged the worst by a freeze just because you have so much moisture built up in that trash. It'll freeze before a burnt field will, and you get a lot more freeze damage as well. We're working on some green harvest solutions. The technology is just not quite there yet. But I think we talked about this when you guys came down on the tour. Sugarcane's a C4 crop, so it's using CO2 faster and more efficiently than any other crop out there. So for 364 days, 23 hours, and 30 minutes of the year, that sugarcane crop, being a C4 crop, is pulling carbon dioxide out of the air for photosynthesis and for energy production for the plant. When we light the field on fire, it's only burning for 20 or 30 minutes, right? So all year long, we're cleaning oxygen. And then when we burn for 20 to 30 minutes. Yeah. So I don't know. And I can elaborate a little bit more on what Florida's natural environment's like and stuff like that. But,
Well,
I don't know if we want to say that for later.
Sure, that's just interesting that when they said they were going to take us to a burn, I figured it was a burn at the plant, and that was part of the refining process. We pulled up to a field, and they literally drove a tractor with a tank of mixed fuel around it and lit it like a flamethrower. You know, I mean, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but they drove around, and we're sitting there going, huh, interesting. You know, Corey, if you burnt your cornfield, you'd probably have some standability issues going in to try to harvest it.
I've seen burnt cornfields. They'll still stay standing. You just have some smoky kernels.
Smoky kernels, see? But it's amazing what they can do with the sugarcane to be able to get that in. But you guys have any more questions about the burning? Or
No.
should we go to the mill?
I'm ready to get the mill.
So you load it up and we get it to the mill. What's that process like? We take it off the rail car. We know that it only comes in by rail. What happens when it comes off the rail car?
Yeah, so a stalk of sugarcane, it's about 70% water, about 10 to 13% sucrose, and then it's about 14% fiber, and then there's about 2% of that's non-soluble sucrose. So when that cane gets to the mill and it's dumped out of the rail car, the first process is to crush that cane. And what we're doing is we call them a tandem, but inside that tandem there's a set of mills. And that's literally what we're doing. We're taking those stalks of cane and crushing them and getting every drop of juice out of that stalk of cane as possible. From there, that juice will then go into several different processes of filtration, boiling the water out of it. But ultimately, to produce a crystal of sugar, you're taking that sugar cane juice or the syrup and putting it in a centrifugal, just like a cotton candy maker, right? You introduce a little bit of already crystallized sugar into that juice. You spin it around in a centrifugal, and then it starts crystallizing into sugar. And then from there, it's put onto a dryer. From that dryer, it'll go into the raw sugar warehouse, where it sits until one of the contracts gets called, and we need that raw sugar to go to the refinery to fulfill one of our contracts.
So you said raw sugar. Explain the difference between raw sugar and sugar I buy at the store.
Yep. So you have raw sugar and you have refined sugar. Raw sugar has gone through the milling process, but not the refining process. So that raw sugar still has quite a bit of molasses and impurities in it. So when you look at raw sugar, you would think that it's just like a light brown sugar. And it pretty much is, but it just hasn't been refined yet. So once you have this huge heaping mound of raw sugar that's not a sellable product, you can't sell raw sugar to consumers. The only thing you can sell to consumers is refined sugar. A lot of people think that, brown sugar or sugar in the raw is sugar that hasn't been refined, but it has. We're not legally allowed to sell you raw sugar. So once that sugar is in the raw sugar storage, to get it to refined sugar, which is the white sugar, brown sugar, things like that you see in the grocery store, we'll re-liquefy the raw sugar, send that to the refinery where it goes through some more carbon filtration, some more centrifugals, basically to pull the remainder of that molasses and those impurities out of the raw sugar. So then you're left with a nice white, clean, pure sucrose refined sugar.
Which makes sense because when we went into that storage shed and got to see Sugar Mountain, you were handling it with an excavator. It was being loaded with a payloader. So the refining process, because otherwise you just take it straight to fully refined, but then it's probably harder to store then, right?
Correct. Yeah. So raw sugar you can store for a pretty good while. Once that raw sugar leaves the raw sugar warehouse and makes its way into the refinery, that's where all your food safety requirements fall into place, because now you're creating a product that we're going to sell to the consumer. So you'll never see refined sugar stacked up or stored like you do the raw sugar. And essentially that's what the refinery is doing, is making a good quality product for our consumers.
I would say raw sugar tastes just as good as refined sugar.
I like that's the best sugar I've ever had. Nice and raw.
We were able to walk up to that, for our listeners, we were able to walk right up to that pile and stick your hand in it, bury your face in it, do what we pleasured. And we all tasted it. You tasted it, right, Dave?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was good.
The last sugar
How do you-
Dave's going to have for 75 days.
How do you make, obviously we all know what the regular sugar packet looks like, but there's brown sugar, powdered sugar. Do you guys do all of that?
Yep. So at at the Clewiston mill and refinery, most of what we're making is just the normal refined sugar, granulated refined sugar that you would see on your store shelf. Now, with our recent purchase of a refinery in Savannah, they have a whole laundry list of different sugar products that they make: powdered sugar, confectioner sugar. I think there's almost a dozen different types of brown sugar. So let's take brown sugar, for example, right? Brown sugar, you have to take raw sugar, make refined, normal, granulated sugar, and then add food grade molasses back to the refined sugar to create the brown sugar. So brown sugar is essentially refined sugar that's had the molasses added back to it.
Yep. Huh.
There are so many things that we came up with on the train ride. I think, mentioned 4 or 5 times sugar mamas and sugar daddies and we were trying to help your marketing department out. And needless to say, we couldn't believe it. We actually sent your sales team a lead.
Yeah.
Based
I'll
off
be interested to see if that one pans out.
You can't sell raw sugar, though. We just
Can't
said
sell
that.
raw sugar.
Well,
But we
no.
had somebody reach out that wants to buy
Truckloads.
couple truckloads.
Truckloads.
Yeah.
So just to give people scope of what we looked at, where your raw sugar is, there was like 3 buildings plus where all the raw sugar is, and these are enormous buildings. How many tons, if you measure it in tons, of sugar is that when they're all full?
300. We can store 350,000 tons of raw sugar here at our Clewiston facility.
350,000 tons.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if instead of a
And
shed, you could put that in a green bin.
We'll produce about 2 billion pounds of refined sugar every year out of our refinery.
Wow. Let's go back to some of the agronomic things. So, would you say like 80 to 90,000 tons per acre? Is that what you said?
No, 80 to 90. Just 80 to 90 tons.
80, 90. Okay, sorry. I was getting 80, 90 tons. Okay, which is huge, right? Because what's a when we take corn silage, what is it, like 30, 40 ton?
Yeah.
Something like that.
That's good corn
I'm
silage.
not a corn silage nut here. What out of that 80 to 90 tons? Let's just say typical. Let's say 10 or 11% sucrose. What's your yield of sugar?
Yeah, so we see. So that's another thing that we measure is pounds of sugar per acre. We see, 15, 16,000 pounds of sugar per acre. And like I said, anywhere from, some of our less tonnage, lower sucrose fields, it'll be 9 or 10,000 pounds of sugar per acre. But we do see all the way up to every now and again, you'll get 18, 19, 20,000 pounds of sugar per acre.
So immediately I go to add in the cost of sugar. Is this a publicly traded like corn where there's markets, or like how do they determine price of sugar that you guys are selling it for?
Yeah, so the USDA sets the sugar price. A
They
lot
do.
of that's based off of supply and demand. So one of the most important things we do as a company is estimate our crop. And a portion of why we have to estimate our crop is because the USDA needs to know what the domestic supply of sugar looks like, whether it's cane sugar or sugar beet sugar.
That feels like a
and
whole
depending
lot
on
of
what
government oversight there. Like I, as a private guy, I want to sell my own sugar. This is how much it is. Buy it from me. So everybody's regulated.
Yes, yeah. Anybody that's selling sugar domestically is regular. Their price is
Domestically.
pretty much dictated by the USDA.
But if it, on the world market,
we've
is there a world market that sets a price?
Yep. So the world market is set. So the world market price, there's not really a set price for the world market. You have Brazil, India, Mexico. They're kind of like your 800-pound gorillas in the room when it comes to sugar production. Now the difference is they're all fully subsidized. So in India, for example, their sugarcane industry, it's a jobs program. So the government is 100% subsidizing the production of sugarcane in India, which means that they can pretty much sell their sugar on the international market for whatever price they want. If they have $100 to the acre in it, they can turn around and sell it for pennies on the pound because all that $100 per acre is being covered by the government for job security for their people. So when you look at us in America here, we can produce more sugar per acre at a cheaper cost than anybody else in the world. But the difference is we have to be able to sell our product for a profit because the government's not writing us a check at the end of the year for all of our input costs. To give you some perspective or some scope on that, the U.S. price that is paid for domestically grown sugar has only rose about 3% from the early 2000s to current date. We all know fertilizer, diesel, labor, everything else has increased by 100-fold or 200-fold since the early 2000s, right? So part of the reason we do grow sugarcane on such large scale is one, the overhead cost of the mill, overhead cost of the refinery. You can grow all the sugarcane you want to, but if you don't have a mill and refinery to turn it into refined sugar, it's pretty much worthless. But that's why we farm on the scale that we do down here, is because you have to have the volume to outrun the cost of growing the crop.
And America is a net importer of sugar, correct?
Net importer. So we don't produce enough sugar domestically to supply the demand. So you'll hear a lot of people talk about the federal sugar policy, that it's just a giant government subsidy. Sugarcane production in America is not subsidized. We don't get $1 of government money. What we do, however, get is we can get loans from the USDA that are paid back with interest, right? So the U.S. Treasury makes money off of the loans that we get from them. And then that loan is secured by sugar. So whenever there's an excess of sugar on the domestic market, what the government will do is come in and buy that excess sugar, typically at a lower price, but that's their security on that loan that they gave to the sugar farmer, is actual refined sugar or raw sugar.
Corey, would you like it if you're corn, so you're entrepreneur and you have your own farm, if it was government, like here's how much corn is? At least you'd know where your margins are. You wouldn't have to play the hedging game or the gambling game of markets, like of storing it longer, et cetera, et cetera.
If it was consistently for a profit. But in a way, the government has kind of done that a little bit with like ethanol and kind of
like
and
it.
things like that. Have created markets, and they just haven't set the price.
Right.
Correct.
Which, yeah.
Well, we don't want to. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, the main thing that federal sugar policy does is it guarantees that there's going to be a domestic market for our sugar, because we can't compete with international sugar producers because we have to sell our product for a profit. We're not being subsidized by the government. And a lot of people will tell you, well, that's costing the taxpayers billions of dollars a year because we have to pay a higher price for sugar because I can't go get it from Mexico or Brazil or India, right? Well, me personally, I don't want my sugar coming from India, Mexico, or Brazil. They have completely different regulatory standards down there. They have way different labor laws down there. I want an American supply of sugarcane. We're an American company. We're an American industry. And that's what that federal sugar policy does, is it guarantees us a market for our sugar that allows us to stay economically viable. And not to mention, you go to Chick-fil-A, you go to McDonald's or Burger King, you pay 25 cents for a thing of barbecue sauce for them, right? Or 50 cents for a little sauce packet. What's the one commodity you can go into any restaurant and they give you a whole little dispenser of it, and you can rip up as many sugar packets as you want to? That's how cheap and how efficient we make American sugar, is that they still give it away at all the restaurants.
They won't even let you do that with ketchup anymore.
Yeah.
No.
I think Iowans are like
No.
that. Like, he says we want U.S. sugar, right? Well, like we're the best, right? Well, when we think of sweet corn, that's kind of how Iowans are, right?
Got it. That's funny.
They're
Well,
like, that's from Florida. That isn't. No, just
we
kidding.
can't keep you guys forever. So we appreciate the ability to take us down the tracks of what it's like to grow sweet corn and sugarcane in Florida. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close the show out? Because I'm glad we get to share with our listeners what we got to experience in person.
I think the biggest thing for us is, you'll hear Big Sugar, you'll hear,
Big
there's
shoot.
all kinds of propaganda out there about what we do down here. Our doors are open. We do farm tours. I don't know how many people we have come onto our farm to see what we do every day. Neither myself nor Daniel are some, 80-year-old billionaire down here that's just trying to control land and ruin the environment. My family depends on this land. Daniel's family depends on this land. We take care of this land to the best of our ability. I would encourage people before they create an opinion on what we do and how we do things to come down here and see our farms. You can go onto the ussugarexpress.com website. We do train tours all throughout the year. We do some tours through our city, the city of Clewiston. Our doors are open. We want people to come down here and see what we actually do on a day-to-day basis. Like I said, we're not just a bunch of old men sitting around trying to rape the land and make a bunch of money, right? We're family farmers. We just do it at a little bit different scale.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add that go to your market and buy some Florida sweet corn right now. It's there.
We can buy it
It'll
now.
be there until spring, and you don't got to wait till the summer. It's
Yeah.
there.
We'll come get some. And there's a lot of farmers that come down to Florida for vacation in the winter, a little R&R. I would definitely encourage you, if you go south, hook them up or look them up, because if you like growing things, I mean, you will just generally enjoy that tour. If you like trains, if you like anything agriculture, even if you like to fish, you can go down there and fish Lake Okeechobee, and it's the best bass fishing in the world. So, yep, it's pretty cool.
No, that was good. Gentlemen, we appreciate you, the time you took today, plus the time that you gave us the entire day while we were down there. Your crew put a really good tour together. We left here blown away. I think we were talking about it the whole way back. Obviously, we scheduled this interview as fast as we did because we wanted to share the story. So thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I enjoyed talking to y'all on the train and today as well.
Absolutely.
There'll be more.
Yes, hopefully we get to do it again. And then listeners, thank you for sticking around with this unique show. So until next time, have a good one.